G'day, welcome to Market Time After Work. Today I want to do a bit of a review on this scope in front of me. Now this is the March Mini Genesis. I've done a review previously on the March Genesis scope, which is an interesting concept. This one's actually been done up in MOA, and it is a scope that I think is worthwhile. I want to use it a bit this season. It's a scope that I think is done up and in a fashion, or the concept and how they've actually put it together, I think it's going to really suit some people. Now this is the Mini, which is all exactly the same to the full Genesis. It's just a little bit smaller. So where the full Genesis goes, I think it's a 6 to 60 power. This is a 4 to 40. Me using really around the 15 to 20 and maybe up to the 30 when you push the boundaries. Having 40 has more than I need anyway, but it's good. It's got up to 40. The 60 was probably a step too far. I don't use that much power and didn't find myself using it, so there's no losses as far as I'm concerned on that. And this one actually has 300 minutes of elevation in the Mini, whereas the full Genesis has 400 minutes of elevation. And I'll get into a little while, but that also I don't see as a negative whatsoever with this scope. So to me, the Mini is probably the pick of the bunch, or the pick of the two, but that's a personal thing, and there's other details involved with that. The main concept of this scope, which makes it a little bit, like I said, a little bit from the past in some forms, but actually very much a new take on the idea, is that whereas most scopes adjust their elevation by they have a fixed set of glass through there, in the way of they have all the lenses inside the scope, and then they adjust the elevation by adjusting the erector tube. There's a tube in there with your reticle in it and bits and pieces in it, which would adjust that up and down so you actually view through your lenses in a different shape. As you wind up your elevation, it actually looks down further. When you back your elevation off, it looks up further. What that means is, and the way a normal scope works, is you look through different places in your lenses, up and down and left and right, look slightly differently through the optical center of your lens. This is this is one of the things that limits how much adjustment you can have, internal elevation you can have. It's also the size of the tube and the shape of the mechanics of the inside your scope, but it is also you're using around the optical center of your scope. Now, for a glass people, for a telescope and that sort of stuff, to get your absolute best image, they would always use your dead center. They want to look straight through everything dead straight, and not be looking through off the center. So that's what this scope's been done with, where you only ever look through the exact center of your lenses. That's where your image is. So you still have full image, but your actual center of your image is the center of your lenses. Now, to do that and always do that and still get elevation, the way these guys have done it is they adjust the whole scope, into basically your turrets are working on the outside of your scope. So you're always looking through the center and the scope moves. I've got images of showing that, the actual scope tilting over and back, and also when you adjust left and right, it's also twisting one way or the other way. These are only slight movements for the amount we get in the way of adjustment, in the way of an MOA or adjustments that as we dial the turrets, but that's how it's actually doing it. It's adjusting this center box, holds the tube through the center of it, and then there's similar to the normal sorts of springs and adjustment screws and things that are inside your scope. In this case, are sort of on the outside of the scope. They have seals and things to keep this all separate, so it still is an internal thing. If you notice here, there is these rubber boots. There's also some slide seals that are inside there, so there's double or triple barrier to make sure you're not getting gunk inside there. But it means this scope, like I said, you're always looking through the dead center. The other feature that gives us is, because we're just in the outside of the scope, and I should quickly come back to that, there is very old scopes, I can't bring their names to mind right now, but there's scopes from, I don't know when it was, from the early of the 20th century, so back in 1920 or 1950 or somewhere around there, where they had this same sort of concept of adjusting the outside of a little telescope. So a similar concept, done far more thoroughly and more adjustment, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that was a long time ago is where that concept came from. And when you think about it, quite simple. And the other feature that it gives you is you then have so much more adjustability. You're not limited how far your rectitube can move or how much your mechanism inside there can move it or how much your lenses can move. It's just about a case of moving your scope. Now that moves into another feature, but as said, that means that on the full march it has 400 minutes. This has 300 minutes of elevation. Now, I suppose, as I said, that's going to suit some people. That sounds really great. It isn't all great. There is some other bits that go with it. When you do adjust your scope, as you see in those images, the scope tilts over more and more and more. So I find, I suppose I'd go with, I think around the 200 to 250 minutes elevation is where, for most setups, it is the end of where it's practical and easy to use. Beyond that point, once you start to tilt the scope over, and that's just dialing it up even further, then all of a sudden you've got to move your cheek piece and get higher, and also you'll start to look through your barrel. So you've tilted the nose of the scope down far enough where you start to look through the barrel. So shorter barrels, smaller muzzle brakes, that'll make it easier. Or raising your scope up. They do a spacer that can go in between your rail and your scope. But essentially it lifts it up higher, so then you can get more elevation. This also matters whether you've got a guardrail or how much clearance you've got to your barrel as to how far you can twist it. It matters the adjustable and cheek piece height and butt rest height, all those sort of things are affected. So I tend to find at the 400 minutes of elevation in the big one particularly, or even the 300 minutes of elevation in this one here, it's only going to suit some people. But I suppose let's be realistic. Where are you using 300 or 400 minutes of elevation? It means it's capable of getting there for the super rare thing, and you're on the right rifle or you jack it up high and do that sort of stuff. You can actually dial from 100 yards zero, you can dial the way up there. So it has that real feature. Very precise dialing, and all I've tested with it, it's very precise in its tracking side of things. That's all set up properly. So you can dial all the way up from nothing. So, and that might be in a place where I think these would work quite well for your likes of your ELR with a 22. So short barrel, all that sort of stuff, that might well work. You're not dealing with too much in the way of your position with recoil and things like that. So it'd work on that sort of score, sort of makes it work nicely there. Where I think this is really going to fit is in the normal ELR sort of stuff. So that's going into the world of the 150, 160, 200, 220, 250 minutes of elevation, whether that's shooting your 300 Win mag at 2,500 yards, or it's shooting you're doing a little bit of the play stuff and the 6.5 Creedmoor at 2,000 yards or at 2,500 yards, something like that, where then you just want to be able to dial it on, use your scope for other things as well, and I suppose that comes back into other features of the scope. The glass quality, yes, like I said, you're looking through optical center. So very good glass. The guys over at Dion that put these scopes together, the glass quality, the form and function of the scope is all very, 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 very thorough. I've got images on here of what those images look like, and they have a range of reticles. This is a reticle that I quite like. This is quite simple, quite clean. And as said, the glass is really up there in the top level. There isn't any question about that sort of stuff. I suppose I would, for those people who don't know March scopes, very much a popular face in bench rest shooters. Basically they have, I think they've got a 60 or an 80 power scope. I think it's a 80, well, but very big and very high power. And that's really designed to see paper holes at 1,000 meters is what they sort of level they push things through. For me, in the ELR sort of stuff and using out here, this reticle, I like it. It's a nice reticle. You can come right back down to your low powers, and it's still got the arms to be able to use on the outside of the reticle. But up in high power, it's got nice base about and that sort of thing. This was still okay to use, I would say, in the 40 power, in the way of the thickness of the reticle. It is first focal plane, so that reticle is getting thicker. But really for where I want to use it and where I find very practical, use it from really 15 power to maxing it out 30 power. That's unusual for me to go up that high. It's really more like 15 to 25. This is really, really nice. This is very, very clear. And like I said, I'd have to say very good glass. The rest of the function from the parallax, it has a little mini throw lever, and when you get the scope, it comes with a larger throw lever, what people want to go on there on the power side of it. This is a lock-up focus, so it has where you can actually adjust it, and you've got a lock-up point in the focus, so I like that about it. This one's in MOA. There's 50 minutes per revolution, 50 minutes or MOA per revolution. Very solid clicks on it, very nice and sharp on that side of things. Very simple to set up, I suppose, one of the things I would say about this. And one of the other things that's not going to suit everyone is they're an expensive scope. As for what they are in your country, I couldn't say, or you through how your network, however you get it, you'd have to price it. But consider when you're looking at buying one of these scopes, this is a complete package. To get to, and this is 300 minutes of elevation, but even if we go to where I find the practical limit would be around the 250, which isn't far off, it's the entire thing. This is ready to bolt onto your scope rail. You'll be able to get the 250 minutes from a 0 MOA scope rail. You could come up further. You don't need more than a 50 MOA scope rail, but this is designed to work on a 0 or a 20 MOA scope rail, and you're still going to get all that practical internal elevation. And that's it. There's no rings needed. There's no special base needed. That whole lot is there, and in most cases where you'd want a extra elevation adder, so whether that's the Night Force wedge or that's one of the TACOM things with the Charlie Tarak or one of the other TACOM units, or an adjustable base or all the other bits and pieces you can get to do this. No, this comes as a complete package. The scope does everything. So all of a sudden expensive doesn't become that expensive, where if you want to factor in other ways to do it, especially when you're talking about getting this level of quality in the way of glass or the optical quality of this scope. So I suppose that's where I would say with it. We're going to use it this season. This one was done and set up for us by March, so we can go and use it and show it off a little bit on the channel. I already have used it. I was impressed with it. It really is up there in the top level in the way of using a scope for what I do. So really happy with it. I suppose the only other features I'd say about it, you look on the top here, there's a rail. It means the only thing I would say that is different to what I'm used to, I wouldn't say it's negative or positive. I'm used to now using the likes of the ring clamp on bubble levels over the side, and with this sort of system you can't use that sort of thing. This little rail on the top here, I just stuck on one of my normal, I use the US Optics, but any of the normal sort of rail bolt-on bubble levels can sit on the top here and end up in exactly the same place. So, and whether you want to stick other things on the top there for helping with sighting and that sort of stuff, there is a little rail on the top. But I think it is going to be a practical scope for some people, and I look forward to using it. The little effort I've had with it so far has been great. Yeah, and I suppose that the one bit I hadn't touched in the whole conversation, this is just 52. It's Bell size, so the objective lens. I found no negatives to that whatsoever. 52 to 56, it was really no differences whatsoever, and that is also going to give you that little bit more clearance in the front of it for if you're sitting it on more sort of normal rifles and trying to run that higher elevation. Okay guys, well that's about my little chat to go with this one here. I like the scope. I think it's worthwhile checking out at least. Like I said, they do cost a little bit, these things. Check it out in your area, but before you shy completely away from it, consider what you would actually need to spend once you put an optical adder, be it adjustable base, be it something on the front of the scope, to get to that 250 minutes in a quality scope. It, for most places, is going to come into a far more reasonable place in the market than you might have thought. Anyway guys, that's my comment on that one today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave any thoughts or comments below, and we'll catch you next time.